Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Well, that was a thing. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't a bad thing. It just wasn't quite my bag. The best way I can describe it is a schizo hypercomic. Honestly, that was a bit too much. It was sort of a sensory overload for me, and it left me dizzy and disoriented. Not that I couldn't follow along with the plot, and not that it wasn't a bad way to tell a multiverse story. It just was too much of a sensory overload schizo hypercomic. And let's see, how else do I put this? Well, let's talk about the story. This is the story of Miles Morales' Spider-Man, a guy I know nothing about. Well, I know something about him now. He is an ethnic Spider-Man, half black, half Latino, and honestly, I had no problem with him. The problem was, again, the aforementioned schizo hypercomic. And honestly, the fact that this particular Spider-Man was ethnic had nothing to detract from the story. Okay, I feel like I'm talking in circles. Let's start with the cast. Honestly, all the Spider people and side characters worked well off each other and were memorable in their own right. Two of the villains were also really good. They had nice depth. The rest of the villains, a little too video game boss battle-ish. They needed more depth. The side characters, I don't think I mentioned them yet, but in case I did, just going to repeat myself, also did a good job. The animation style, when it wasn't schizo, was interesting. I've sort of seen it before in the Big Hero 6 TV series, and it kind of worked. But when everything went schizo, that's when it kind of fell apart for me. The plot was easy enough to follow. It just didn't give us enough time to slow down and breathe. If maybe it had slowed up just a little bit, it would have been much better. The voice cast had a few surprises for me. I mean, I knew Lily Tomlin was voicing Aunt May, which kind of gave her a nice bit of depth. And Liev Schreiber, aka Sabretooth from the Wolverine prequel, he was good as Kingpin. But the one that surprised me was Chris Pine as one of the Spider-Men. I could not for the life of me place some of the voices, because I don't like looking at the cast first, because I like surprises. And that was a genuine surprise. The action was a little too stylized for my taste. I don't know, maybe tone down the anime, bring back the classic animation just a bit. Just a little bit. But other than that, it was an okay story. You Know Who showed up posthumously. Rip Stan. Overall, this movie felt very self-aware, not just of itself, but of other things. I don't want to call it a parody, but it was definitely parody-ish, but not in a bad way. I'm sure plenty of kids will love Into the Spider-Verse, but maybe I'm just too old, too set in my ways. Although I do want to see where this particular story and Spider-Man go. Because, honestly, I found Miles Morales just as relatable as Peter Parker. And this is coming from a white guy. I had no problem with Miles Morales' ethnicity. I guess that's all. This is Mr. J signing out and reminding you, comics may change, but that doesn't mean nerds have to change. A nerd is nerd is nerd is nerd.